welcome to the Vincent Crowley channel. Today we are going to do a special episode about bands from the 80s, the early 80s, that either came out with an EP album release before or during 1985. Um, Bands that later became either popular, infamous, or regularly talked about today. We have a special guest today. We have Eddie from Realms of Metal YouTube channel. What's going on, Eddie?
Ah, all good, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem, man. It's fucking love the channel. It's cool we did that first interview together.
Yeah, you were the first guy to have the balls to actually come on my channel, and when I emailed you, you were probably like, "Who the fuck is this guy?"
That's the one thing that like I don't understand about bands. I get so many emails from people I don't know who the fuck they are, but it's like they end up a lot of times being regular people I am in communication with.
Yep.
So everybody's important, and hey, you're doing a kick-ass job with your channel. Do you
Like,
let the viewers know about your channel and how you started to do it?
yeah, man, we've been doing it for about a year now. Actually, just over a year. A friend and I started it, and as the months went on, like he kind of got out of it a little bit, and so I took the lead probably like 3 or 4 months in. And
Mm-hmm.
I've just been, I talk about records, I talk about whatever, any genre, just to kind of keep metal in the forefront. I'm a big vinyl fiend. I like to do, I like to show everybody what vinyls I picked up, and maybe I can turn somebody onto a band they've never heard of before, and I have. I mean, I've turned a lot of people onto a lot of stuff. The comments have actually been pretty positive. You know how the internet could be a fucking hateful
Right,
place sometimes, but
right.
most of the people are very supportive, and I feel like you are like the top of that pyramid. Like everything starts with you. Like you go on everybody's channel, like it filters down from like you to Mordant Red to Barry at That Cold Metal Show to myself to J Dog to all those guys. So I think you're the catalyst for all this.
I don't know about that, but it's cool to be part of the game. It's to me, I'm not very sociable. I don't go out much. I
I'm not
go to
either.
shows when I can. I don't hang out with a bunch of people. I'm kind of in seclusion all the time,
Yep.
but this is a way, at least for me, to get knowledge about what's happening and stuff, and like
Yeah.
kind of share with my world too.
Yep.
So yeah, I have to ask because even on my channel, I get comments, especially when I heard you were on. Uh, Revok from Morton Red
Here we go.
calls you the Casey Kasem of metal.
I guess
So
that's because he thinks I'm like calm and when I do my videos, and I don't know, I'm not the best speaker in the world. I just try to like get my own thing, when I tell everybody I'm in my happy place. I mean, I'm really in my happy place here. Like you can tell, I got all my records and my figures around, and there's no place else I'd rather be.
that's good. I one thing I enjoy about your channel is you definitely do your homework. You incite people to to go and check things out, and it's definitely just not slung together. So
Thanks.
definitely appreciate what you do, man.
Thank you. And I don't claim to know everything about everything. There's many bands I don't know a lot about, but the ones I do is the ones I talk about, and hopefully I can. People have turned me on to a ton of stuff too. Viewers and everybody, like I've got turned on to so much stuff since I started this channel. Like everybody throws stuff at me. And it's great. We got a nice community here, and it's pretty awesome to be a part of it.
Right on. So onward we will go to the early 80s. And I have to say, we must start with the mighty Venom.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Welcome to Hell from 1981. That started off a fire in the underground. There you go.
It's a must-have record. I mean, Venom formed in what 1979. They were probably of the bands that we're talking about today. They were probably the first band that formed, right?
Yeah, actually you got black metal, I think, up there. This
Yep.
was I think was it Welcome to Hell was the 81.
Yeah.
Uh it definitely lit a fire under everybody.
Holy shit.
I mean, at that point in time, I thought, Motorhead was the band that was really like just going against the grain. And when Venom came around, it
I
was
know.
just unbelievable.
Yep.
So, do you remember the first time you ever listened to Venom?
Dude, like I told you before, like I got into metal. I became a metalhead in '88. So I started with thrash. I started with Metallica. They were my gateway. And I eventually got into death metal in the early '90s with the first Deicide. I didn't listen to Venom probably until, 94, 95. I got to be honest with you. I was very late to
Hmm.
the Venom party. Just none of my friends listened to Venom, so I wasn't really exposed to them back then. You can go
Right.
over a friend's house and see what they're listening to, and hey, check this band out. It's Venom. Like I never had that. So there I was a late bloomer to Venom for sure.
Well, I think a lot of people that were getting into the '90s, like death metal, the Deicides, the Morbid Angels, and what have you. I I I think when bands started doing interviews and saying these are our influences, I think that's when it started to get popular again, especially when the black metal rise came and everybody was talking about Bathory and everything else.
Yep.
So yeah, it was definitely people going back and checking out what was happening back
I
then.
mean, so influential. Like maybe I'm wrong here, but was Venom the first band to introduce those kind of pseudonyms, stage names that they have? Like Kronos, Mantis, Abaddon. Uh, I know Sodom did it maybe a few years later, but can you think of anybody else who was doing that back then?
You know, Again, HELLHAMMER, but that was after Venom. There was actually quite a few bands, at least in the underground that were doing that. But I think Venom is probably the most well known for doing that for
Right.
sure.
And all the black metal bands, especially the second wave, stole that from them. Bands like Immortal and Dark Throne and Mayhem and Dark Funeral, like they all have those pseudonym kind of stage names. So I think that's pretty cool. I think if Venom did start that, which I think they did, I mean that's pretty awesome in my book.
Yeah, absolutely. So after that, we'll think about a man named King Diamond with his band Merciful
Ooh.
Fates.
I know you're a huge King Diamond Merciful Fate fan.
And 1982, there it is, the self-titled album, or EP, I should say.
Yep.
Um, I think everyone calls that "Nuns Have No Fun."
They
I
do. At
mean,
least in my
yeah,
circle, they do.
yeah. Uh, when Merciful Fate came out, them again, they actually, to me, they took what Venom did and made it a lot more serious, a lot more just. It was so dark, the music, and something that I've been wanting to hear for a long time when I was a kid. So
Yep.
uh, they became my one of my favorites back then, and they
I
still
bet.
are to this day. So
I know.
uh,
I know that's a heavy influence for you.
absolutely, man.
Yep.
And then you come out with Melissa and Don't Break the Oath, and it just.
Epic, timeless records. What do you say to
Mhm.
those guys? Do you like the Merciful Fate beyond that? Because a lot of guys are just these elite metalheads, and I only listen to Merciful Fate up to Don't Break the Oath. I think that's kind of stupid to like leave out the later part of their catalog. I think it's important too.
Luckily, I've said this before. Everything that King Diamond's ever released in Merciful Fate or King Diamond, I like.
Yep.
There are some things I like better, some things I might not like as much,
Right.
but I can't even think of one song that I go, man, that sucks. I never want to listen to that
Right. Me
shit.
neither. Me neither.
So yeah, that band was again another staple in metal history.
Right. Now, just speaking of King Diamond and Merciful Fate, you had mentioned on your list the Nasty Savage, Nasty Ronnie. I
Yeah,
really think he takes a lot of influence from King Diamond. He like, especially on that first record, he does a lot of that falsetto stuff, and
yeah,
I could hear immediately when I listened to that record the influence that he got from King Diamond back then, or Merciful Fate. So,
yeah. With Nasty Savage, it was weird because when I started high school, I was living in Michigan, and my parents moved to Tampa. So when we relocated there, it was kind of like I didn't know anybody, and just trying to find other people in the metal and stuff.
yeah,
And while I was underage and sneaking into like metal bars, I actually met Ben Meyer, who was a guitarist for Nasty Savage.
Yep.
And they had just recorded their record, the self-titled one, and it was coming out soon. And he actually had a copy in his car. He said, "Hey, I have it on tape. You want to check it out?" And that's the first dose of that. And then in the Tampa scene, Nasty Savage, I don't care what band it is from there, you know a Nasty Savage, and most likely you're influenced by Nasty
Right.
Savage.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, that was definitely another one that's big, and people still have a lot of respect for them today, and they still do shows, but it's not the original lineup, but they still play those classic tunes.
Yeah. To me, this is one of the best metal EPs ever, you know, in my opinion. This Merciful Fate EP, Nuns Have No Fun, whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely, man. So why don't you give us a little pick?
How about we do oh, I know this one's right up your alley. How about the first Carnivore record?
Oh yeah. Yep. Mr. Peter Steele.
Absolute classic, stone cold classic of a record. I know influenced you, especially with the Infidel Reich that you do.
Yes.
You know, I
very
can
much.
listening to this record, you know, I could definitely hear, you know, all your Infidel Reich stuff, really, but you know, definitely paying homage to bands like this, and that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, well, we actually started Infidel Reich. We set forth. We're like, okay, we want to have that rawness and attitude of like Carnivore, S.O.D, and Motorhead, and but have that like almost Swedish death metal kind of heaviness and
Yep.
stuff. And yeah, if you would put a Carnivore album out today, they would be canceled within 5 fucking seconds. And a funny story is Asheron played a Milwaukee Metal Fest one year with Carnivore, was doing their reunion.
Right.
And I was looking forward to that. I'd never seen them live. And I remember being in the crowd and all these goth girls there because of Peter Steele. And all I could think about is like, I can't wait till they play Male Supremacy or some shit like that they're going to be pissed off as fuck. And again, I mean, it was a killer band. They're definitely ahead of their time.
Way ahead, way ahead.
And I miss bands like that for sure.
Me too. Me too. You know, I miss, like, I feel like in the 80s, metal frontmen were more outspoken back then. And I feel like, you know, they're kind of in the background now. Like they're not saying too much. Maybe they're afraid of, you know, the woke shit going on. Like Billy Milano back then, like, you know, Billy Milano is one of my heroes. And I know M.O.D is working on new stuff. But like, I would love to hear more from Billy Milano, like on social media or in interviews, but I just don't hear it these days.
Yeah, it was great because you know, talking about the Nasty Savage, I had that just because Billy Milano and Nasty Ronnie were friends. And I had told the story before. I was friends with a couple of the guys from Nasty Savage, and there was a kind of a rift between supposedly Nasty Ronnie and Billy Milano.
Oh, really?
Little shit talking.
Okay.
And later, years later, I found out, at least I was told, that that whole thing was just like a gimmick, like a wrestling gimmick.
You know what? I remember you saying that on one of your shows.
Yeah.
I do.
And I thought that is so fucking awesome, man. It's just like get people all riled up, pick a side and shit like that. And
Yep.
It's that interaction with the fans, and it's fucking so cool about that stuff.
Really good. Really good.
So why don't you give us one more pick? Because that Carnivore is definitely up there, brother.
Let's see what we got. Well, speaking of Billy Milano, I mean, let's go to Speak English or Die.
Oh man.
Right?
I'll tell you, the riffs on that album are some of the heaviest, fucking catchiest riffs ever.
You know, March of the S.O.D is probably the best intro ever. I mean, you cannot listen to that and not break shit around the room when you listen to it. It's just one of the most epic intros I've ever heard, as you know, especially for a crossover band. Like, just
right,
spark something in you.
Yeah, it's I mean, I remember Headbangers Ball. He actually used one of their riffs, I think, for the intro of that.
Right, you're right. Yeah.
Of course, they never showed them on there, but it's no. But that again was an album that was supposed to be tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
People took it the way they should have.
Right.
And if that was released today, that would be canceled within sessions.
No. And I know where Billy Milano stands, like on his side of, politics and his views and stuff. And I'm not sure the other guys stand the same way, Charlie, Scott, and Dan. Like I'm not really. I know Scott and Charlie definitely not, but I don't know where Dan stands. But my guess is probably not with him. But
Right. Well, since we're bringing that up, let's do Anthrax.
All right.
Fistful of Metal.
All right.
Let me see. Got my notes up on the wall here.
Got that here somewhere. Here we go.
That was 1984. Yeah.
Yep.
Neil Turbin singing.
Neil Turbin. And Dan Looker was in this lineup too.
Yes, indeed. I don't know. I might be a small percentage, but that's my favorite Anthrax album, right?
Is it really? You're kidding?
Yeah, that is. I thought Neil Turbin's voice fit it. I thought the riffs were like, I mean, it was thrash, but it was still heavy metal, and it had a lot of good stuff. I like their later stuff, but Joey Belladonna, he was an acceptable vocalist, but I didn't think he like grabbed you by the nutsack hard enough.
Right.
You know what I mean? It just,
for me, like he was the Anthrax voice of my youth, So when I like probably State of Euphoria was the first Anthrax record I picked up, and then I went to the back catalog from there. So Joey is kind of like the staple for me. And if I'm a little bit older and this was the first one I heard, I'd probably feel a little differently,
Right. No, and Joey did some great albums. They had some good stuff. I like John Bush and Armored Saint, but I can't say I like any of that stuff. But
yeah. I like it.
Anthrax.
To me, I think I talked about it in one of the videos. I like that era of Anthrax, but I don't love it, just.
Right. So let me see if.
But I mean,
this is a must. And they went to become, one of the biggest metal bands ever. Slayer Show No Mercy.
Yeah, man. I got it here.
Yes. Now, when that album came out, I mean, I remember there was actually another Slayer out at the same time on another label.
S.A. Slayer or something like that.
Something like that, but they didn't last too long after they came out.
Or maybe they changed their name. I think it was like San Antonio Slayer. Weren't they from Texas?
Yeah, I think it was actually. Okay. They actually weren't a bad band.
They weren't bad.
You can't compete with that band right there. You're holding it up. So
right, no doubt.
That was another band that took you to a different level. I like a lot of Slayer. I mean, throughout the years. I mean, there's some I'm not fond of.
Me too.
But I'll tell you that the early stuff is just amazing. I mean,
everything all the way up until Seasons in the Abyss for me are gold. Like every record is gold for me, and that whole lineup stayed intact all the way up to Seasons in the Abyss. And I think when Divine Intervention came out, that was when you had Bostoff on drums.
Right. Yeah, and one of my favorite releases is that EP, that Haunting the Chapel. I mean,
brilliant.
Fucking great stuff.
Yeah.
But again, they were one of those bands that were very underground, and you have to find them in the record store under a special section. And now, they'd be selling fucking arenas and shit.
I wish they were still together. I really do, but Tom Araya wanted to retire, and in my opinion, there's no Slayer without him, So I think all the other guys are, if you had to, they replaced Dave Lombardo, for Christ's sake,
Right.
I think all the other guys could be replaceable except him, to be honest with you.
Right. I mean, Paul was a good drummer. He was a great drummer, actually, but Dave had a style that was Slayer. Yeah. And I totally agree with you there for sure.
Yeah, amazing record, man. The Antichrist, Died by the Sword, Black Magic. Fuck. Show No Mercy, I think, is one of my favorite Slayer tracks ever. It's got like this punk vibe and feel to it. I love that track.
Yeah, I mean, Die by the Sword is like, I don't know why that wasn't on the radio. It was heavy, but it was just so fucking catchy and shit.
One thing I wanted to ask you about with Slayer, I know when you watch documentaries about Slayer and they were, they came out from what? LA? They were in that LA scene, right?
Yeah.
They wanted to rebel against the glam shit that was going on out there and, the hair and the makeup and stuff. But when they came out, they wore eye black under their eyes, right?
Yeah, in fact, it's funny because besides like Hellhammer and shit, I think Slayer's like one of the first that were doing it like that,
Right. I
and
wonder if they were rebelling against that stuff, why they felt the need to do that. I just don't know. I don't think they like to talk about it, or Kerry King doesn't like to talk about it, but
yeah, I guess they did some shows in San Francisco,
right.
and the guys from like Exodus and stuff were like going, you
Bailoff
shouldn't be
wasn't having
doing
it.
that. But if you think about it, the black metal bands probably appreciate that now because
I know.
that's common everyday thing for them.
I know.
Why don't you pick up one more, see what's going on?
Well, speaking of Slayer, I mean, let's go to Kill 'Em All.
Right?
I mean, really, the
That was
first thrash metal album, they had the first record that had that thrash crunch to it, that adopt that everything was thrash metal. Like this was it. This was the
yeah.
thrash metal sound.
It's I remember my friend had bought that album and lent it to me, and I put it on, and I was like, it was like after school or something. I was like fucking dead, probably fucked up, and I was just like kind of passed out, and fucking that anesthesia, fucking full of teeth. I woke up to that fucking thing, and I was like, "What in the fuck am I listening to?" and shit. And yeah, that was definitely an album where it again, like Motorhead, it took it up a notch and
Yeah, yeah.
and gave you a whole different perspective of what metal could be for
And these
sure.
thrash bands, and they'll tell you, like I'm sure, like Hetfield, will tell you that Motorhead was a huge influence on them. I mean, you can hear it, with tracks like Motorhead's like Too Late, where you
Mm-hmm.
kind of get that like chugging riff, and then Metallica like took that to another level and made it, that crunchy chugging riff, that thrash riff. And
Right, right. And and from that, came out with Megadeth. Killing is my business. I
I love that record. I love the rawness of that. I love the ferocity of that. It was faster than Kill 'Em All.
Mhm.
I love that record a lot. I probably like that a little more than Kill 'Em All, to be honest with you.
I mean, I definitely like that album. Megadeth's one of those bands, though. It's a hit or miss for me. I think Dave Mustaine is an amazing songwriter.
Me too.
I'm just not the biggest fan of his vocals personally,
Right.
but it would have been interesting to see what Metallica did if he would have stayed in that band for sure.
Here's the age old question, if Cliff Burton had not died, do you think Metallica would be where they are? You think they would taken a different path?
I think they would have. He didn't seem like the guy that would be cutting his hair, painting his nails, and
Probably
doing the
not.
corporate shit.
Right. I agree.
You'd still be wearing that jean jacket with the Leonard Skinner shirt.
Totally agree.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, another one for me is Possessed. Seven Churches. I mean, that was actually, there's always that debate who created death metal. Back then that was considered thrash, but man, that was a whole different entity coming out.
Death thrash.
Um,
Yeah.
it was so fucking brutal and pounding and evil and
Really is.
satanic. And
Yep.
I mean, that was definitely something you couldn't get past your fucking parents and fucking have them go, it's not bad. Fucking scared the shit out of most people. And, I remember getting that album, and a lot of people that were in the metal I knew were like, how the fuck you listen to that shit? And it's like, no,
Yeah.
that
When I
shit
was a
better.
kid, this was an acquired taste for a lot of my friends. Most of my friends didn't like it because they thought the vocals were too harsh. A lot of my friends were thrash heads. They just didn't like the vocal style. But it is what it is. I think it's legendary, man. I really do.
Yeah, I think Jeff Becerra's like vocals are some of the best ever. They're sick. Uh, can't say anymore. It's just like a classic must-have album, man. J Dog always says on his channel, like, if you don't like this, you aren't metal. It's like it's kind of true
I
to a
think it's
point.
true. I think it's true.
But no, I mean it's just like if you like death metal,
Yeah.
that is something you definitely have to have in
And
your
the
collection.
that intro to The Exorcist still gives me chills whenever I hear it. You know, I put it on, I'm like, ooh, you get that chill, like, oh, this is some great stuff.
Right.
You know what cracks me up about Possessed is Larry Lalonde. You know, he went on to be in what, Blind Illusion, then he went on to Primus. I just think that's
Right.
hilarious going from Possessed to those kind of bands, you know.
I
But,
just had a conversation about that this
did you
week.
really? Yeah.
I work with a younger guy, and he's in his 20s, and he was he loves thrash. So I thought it was pretty cool because he likes a lot of old thrash.
Yep.
So I was telling him, that I said, that band Primus. He's like, yeah, I like Primus. I said, go check out the band Possessed. That's what he played in beforehand.
There you go.
So I'm waiting for him to do the listen and give the feedback on that.
How's that for a 180 for you? Possessed to
Yeah,
Primus.
yeah, that's totally crazy.
But landmark record, really.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think next?
Oh, let's see what I got here. How about the first Bathory?
I was just going to say that. So you're reading my mind.
I love this record. I love Bloodfire Death too. I don't know which one I like more, this one or that, but this one is a little primitive sounding as far as production goes. But considering the time it came out, that's what we got back then. And I just think the songs are so good on here that it makes up for it. Like, geez, Hades, Reaper, Sacrifice, Raise the Dead. Like, how much better does it get than that?
Yeah, it definitely had a cool raw production, and you can even hear some of the Motorhead, influence in that too. Some of the riffing and stuff for sure.
Totally.
And all the albums, I actually am a Bathory fan of like all their eras, because it's when he changed his vocal style, I did have to get used to it, but I started to appreciate what he was doing.
Yep.
Do I wish he would have continued the old way? Absolutely.
Probably.
But I still think he wrote amazing music and very, very cool stuff for that, especially the themes he was doing at that time.
I know, so important. Like, he's the one who got really that Viking metal kind of thing off the ground too, right? Wasn't he the first to kind of do that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think a lot of people didn't get it. Blood, Fire, Death. I remember some people go, "What the fuck's he talking about singing like this?" And it's like, it's just a different theme, different interest, and I kind of respected that, because if that's what he was really into, he didn't. A lot of bands start doing just the satanic stuff, so it's pretty original for that, and definitely a band that holds high to this day to a lot of people.
Absolutely agree. I mean, so influential on everything that came after it. To me, this was the main influence for the black metal bands that would follow in like the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, this band was the blueprint for them, and I saw a comment about this record. Originally, it was supposed to be called Pentagrammaton. Did you know that?
No.
And it got nixed somehow. I don't know what, but I just thought that was a cool title, Pentagrammaton. Like, it sounds like a mix between a demon and like a Decepticon from the Transformers. Pentagrammaton. It just sounds cool.
Right. Yeah.
Landmark record, so important.
No doubt. It's funny because Asheron did a cover of Raise the Dead on one of the Dwell Records tribute album. Then we re-released it on Tribute to the Devil's Music.
Yep. And
going on to that for influences, Asheron, when we were just kind of starting, we had only a few cover songs and we would play just to have it practice. And this next band was one of them. We played a song called Dethroned Emperor from the band Celtic Frost.
Here we go.
Yes. Another band. And as we're talking about these albums, do you notice a theme that none of them sound the same?
They don't. Everybody kind of had their own thing going on. It's amazing.
Yeah, and a lot of people like the same types of stuff, and it wasn't like this big division shit where it is like today, where everyone's just stuck in their own little fucking scene.
Yep.
But that was another band, experimental. They did a lot of stuff. I mean, first few albums and EPs were fucking amazing. I gotta say though, I know Revok likes Cold Lake.
And I was going to ask you about that. Cold Lake, man, is such a head scratcher for me. Like, not that I was into it at the time, but like going back and listening to it now, like, geez, that was like way off the mark for what they had done.
Yeah. You know, my thing was, it was funny because back when that came out, I was living in Detroit, and I was like, that was when I had quit Nocturnus, and I was looking to put Asheron together. So I was
Yep.
looking for people, and a couple friends of mine went to a show. It was supposed to be Celtic Frost and Destruction, which we'll get to Destruction later.
Yep.
But we showed up, and I hadn't heard the Cold Lake album yet. I just saw pictures, and I was like, "What the hell is this about?" You know, it looked like glam rock.
Right.
And we got there, and we found out that Destruction got kicked off the tour, and they had a Van Halen tribute band opening up. So we're in all our fucking underground metal attire going, what the fuck's going on? And they did all the classic songs like glam almost. Like,
Jump.
oh my God, they were going. I was like, the fuck are they doing? I remember being pissed and getting real fucking drunk on that night. I was just like, why would this band do this? It's like one of my favorite bands. But you know, as an artist, you know, I think Tom was saying, you know, at that point, they were getting a push by the label, they were getting
Maybe.
money.
Yep.
He was hanging out with his girlfriend that liked that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So he let that kind of mold him. I mean, whatever. But I mean, I'm just glad he returned and did the final Celtic with fucking some balls. And I love that last album they did too, for
Yeah,
sure.
it was really, really good, you know. And like just like Venom, I think Celtic Frost, has written some of the greatest metal songs ever, like Circle of the Tyrants and Dethroned Emperor, and like they just, so iconic and influenced everybody, They I really don't feel like they get enough credit, to be honest with you. But
Right. So why don't we get to Destruction since that was brought up?
here we go. We do an Infernal Overkill or Sentence of Death?
Either one.
Either one. Destruction, solid as fuck, like all the way through. Like I only looked at the 80s stuff for the purposes of this video, but I mean everything from Sentence of Death all the way up to Release from Agony is, amazing stuff. Like that, not a bad
That
release, not a bad release.
yeah, that it they pretty much started, I think, that German thrash movement,
Yeah.
then came Creator, then came Sodom.
Hmm.
Um, those early Destructions, uh yeah, it's Destruction back then was definitely one of my favorites back then. I always listened to them. I had a buddy in Michigan that fucking worshiped Destruction, and he played guitar. He's actually the guy that started teaching me to play guitar when I
Oh yeah.
first started.
Yeah.
And he'd write these riffs that were so Destruction like, and he never did record this shit. And I always tell him this day, I'm like, oh, we're in our 50s now. Record that shit, man. It's like still some killer stuff.
Yeah.
But Destruction was definitely a band that I thought, again, was different sounding, unique, and it definitely gave you a different feel. Even on the thrash beats of the drums and stuff like that, and the guitar riffs were fucking insane. But
Yep.
yeah, amazing fucking band.
To me, out of those German bands, right, Destruction was probably, especially in the beginning, they were the most thrash, right?
Right.
And I feel like early Creator kind of had like a death metal vibe to it and influenced a lot of the death metal bands going. And I feel like Sodom had an influence on the black metal scene, where like I just feel like the three separate bands, like the big three from Germany, like that's kind of how I feel. Straight thrash for Destruction, black metal influence for Sodom, and death metal for Creator. I don't know how you feel about that.
I could agree with that for sure. Especially Pleasure to Kill.
Yeah.
Because when Pleasure to Kill, they had some drum beats that were fucking just, it was definitely not thrash.
Right.
It was more just like fucking pounding, fucking abuse to your fucking mind and fucking great stuff. Uh, and as like Creator, they were another band super underground when they first came out. I Pleasure to Kill was pretty much, I think, their album that kind of brought them up a little bit.
Yep.
I can remember going to the mall, and they used to have a t-shirt store. They would sell metal shirts, and they had the Pleasure to Kill album cover, for sale. And
Yep.
usually when you hit the malls, you were getting a push by somebody,
Right.
but still they weren't like, mainstream by any means. And
Definitely not.
now you mentioned the name Creator, you know exactly who we're talking about.
Yeah, Pleasure to Kill also almost reminds me of Seven Churches a little bit, just like almost like a death thrash vibe. And like everything on that record I think is gold. Like it's a 10 out of 10 for me. And also every song on that record is about a different way to die. That's
Right.
I think that's pretty cool. Almost like Faces of Death or Traces of Death,
Right.
it's like the record version of it that
Cool theme for
right?
sure.
But
so since we
killer.
mentioned go to Sodom.
Let's do it.
Sodom was another band, that in the Sign of Evil, it's funny because you could tell it was a new band. You could tell they were young. You could hear the mistakes. But that made that album. It was just
Yep.
raw as fuck, primitive as fuck.
Oh yeah,
and just had some brutality about it. And I think it's amazing. They never got to the status of, say, like a Creator, but they have been loyal to the whole thrash movement for all these years, and they continue to put out good albums. They
totally agree.
They do great shows, and
Yep.
and continue to be, again, a band that if you mention Sodom, you know exactly who you're talking about.
Yep. I mean, started out as kind of black speed metal, and like eventually it just morphed into just like a straight up thrash band. Like when it came to, I would say when Expursa Sodomy came out, that EP from '87 is when they started to develop a traditional, more thrash style, and then moving forward from there. But like In the Sign of Evil, Obsessed by Cruelty, that black speed thrash kind of stuff that a lot of bands are doing now. There's a lot of bands that incorporate that style now,
Right.
which I think is great. Like Midnight and all the bands like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there are, those people who only like those first two releases that had the darker elements to it and stuff. I just think they wrote really good music, and hey, you're talking about war and destruction and shit. Fucking, that's good to me too. So
hell yeah.
So one that I think is notorious is Exodus.
It's my favorite band.
Bonded by Blood. I mean, I remember the Ultimate Revenge video. They took the spotlight on that, and they had Slayer, they had Venom. They didn't seem like a lesser band on that video.
No.
And that album is just, every song is great.
I mean, the primitive sounding record, when at least when compared to like Kill 'Em All and all that stuff. But I think the songs are 10 out of 10. The song rating is so good on Bonded by Blood. Strike of the Beast, the title track, Piranha. Like Piranha's like an anthem for me. Like every one of those songs just No Love, the intro to No Love, the acoustic part of that.
Right.
Amazing record.
And the lyrics are kind of like those lyrics that they're not complex. They're kind of very basic and kind of funny in a lot of points.
Yeah.
But it makes that album to have a good time when you fucking listen to that, for sure.
Yeah. And I feel like Exodus kind of got shortchanged. I mean, they were the band in the Bay Area, and then Metallica came there, and I think I watched interviews with Gary, and he said that they had label issues in the beginning, which is why Bonded didn't come out until 85. They just weren't marketed the right way, the way the other bands were, and I feel like kind of Exodus gets shortchanged there, because I think their whole catalog is 10 out of 10 for me, except maybe for like Force of Habit, that one where in the 90s all the bands were kind of going a little mainstream.
Right.
But Exodus for me is the band.
I mean, to me, Gary Holt is one of the fucking masters of the catchy riff.
Hell yeah.
I mean, there's not hardly any Exodus songs that you just can't fucking just get into the groove or whatever they're fucking doing. And yeah, after all these years, it's funny that he can still write. He's like the Tony Iommi,
He
just
is
keeps
a
coming up with
thrash
that
metal.
shit. Yeah,
And he
for
just
sure.
he's like a riff machine. He just comes with riff after riff, and they're I love his guitar tone these days. It's heavy as fuck. Like it's just that band for me really does no wrong. And
Right.
I did watch that Ultimate Revenge tour show to get ready for this.
Right.
And then there was the story about that tour where supposedly Tom Araya pissed on uh, Kronos, and
Oh
he punched him
yeah.
in the face and gave him a black eye or something like that. You remember anything like
Right.
that?
Who knows about there's so many rumors and stories that are fucked and who
Yeah.
knows what's real, but
And
I
Slayer and Exodus worshipped Venom when that tour came around. I remember
yeah,
in interviews I heard Gary and the Slayer guys saying it.
yeah. I don't think that happened just because Kronos used to be like I think a personal trainer or something back in the day,
Oh,
so
really?
he probably would have fucking hit him in the fucking eye, but who knows?
Speaking of Venom, real quick again, looking at Venom's output from the 80's, what did you think of, Calm Before the Storm? That was 1987. That was kind of like a departure for them. It was almost glammy. Like they had these dynamic solos in it, almost like a glam band or like really, really different and odd. And to be honest with you, I don't dislike that record. It's just different.
Eh, when I first heard it, I fucking hated it. Definitely the glam guitar on it, you could tell it got more kind of like
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know, check this out, just I don't know. And I think they had what was that song said, put my great wide muscle in between your thighs. I was like, what the fuck is this shit? It's not like, but then I thought, well, they did have the fucking joke songs too on there.
Right, right.
Eventually, there were some songs on there I liked.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of Wasp a little bit in spots, like the old Wasp records. It kind of has that kind of vibe to it in spots, but
Yeah,
an odd
but
record for sure. Now, the one that
yeah,
came
then
after, I'm sorry, the one that came after that was Primeval. That was 1989, and that was the one that without Kronos. So, in
yeah,
your
for
opinion,
Demolition Man.
is there Venom without Kronos?
Uh, I, it's like I'm such a loyal Venom, old school Venom fan, but I do like the Demolition Man
Me too.
era too.
I
I
like
think
it.
I just wish they would have did Venom Inc. at that time instead of because to me also Kronos is Venom. I mean, he's just a personality that you can't take out of the band. That'd be just like if you took Gene Simmons out of Kiss. It
Right, I
just
agree. I agree.
it's not the same. And Demolition Man's a great front man.
He
He
is.
does awesome on the albums. He does awesome live. It's just I'd have to go Team Kronos for that for
Right,
sure.
right. I actually saw Empire of Evil live years ago, and they were fucking really good, man. I saw them down at St. Vitus in Brooklyn, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
they put on a great show, man. They really did. I think that Demolition Man vocally, like especially on the Primeval record, he's kind of like a mix of, without ripping him off, he reminds me of like Udo and like maybe John Connolly from Nuclear Assault. Maybe a mix of
Yeah.
those two vocally. But I love his vocal style. I love his approach. I actually really like Primeval a lot. I really do.
Yeah, I definitely dig that. Okay, I'm gonna look on my list. Okay, now being from Florida, this band, they definitely became super popular. I love the early stuff. It's like some of their later stuff for just metal, but it's Savatage and their Sirens album from 1983.
Great record.
Um, the Dungeons are Calling, all that. I mean, it's just like all the stuff, the Power of the Night, you know, those first few albums are just fucking amazing. And it was so cool. Because I seen Savatage back then. God, it must have been a dozen times
Yep.
at least.
Being from
And
Florida, right? Or living down in Florida.
yeah, and talking about the old days of hanging at the metal bars underage. John Oliva used to hang out there, and Keith Collins used to play bass for them. So you get to be that annoying fucking teenager, fucking going, "Hey man, what's going on with the band?" And They're
Right.
trying to get their drink on or talk to girls. They're like, yeah, go
Right.
away. you know, but um, very iconic band, and I mean, fucking from that lineup, I mean, Trans-Siberian Orchestra
I
fucking
know.
formed, and they're making probably millions of dollars now
You
doing
know,
that
it's
shit.
amazing to see what they've become over the years. I mean, they adopted that kind of neoclassical kind of vibe to it with their
Mhm.
stuff, especially moving forward. You know, and John Oliva, his vocals, I mean, he's a super amazing vocalist. I mean, he pours his heart and his soul into the lyrics and singing
Mhm.
it, and it just that resonates with me. I mean, I really am a big fan of him.
Hey, Chris Oliva was a fucking amazing guitarist. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I'm surprised he wasn't more talked about than he was, because he just was a fucking beast on the stage. And
Yep.
sad that fucking he had to pass and fucking lose a talent like that for sure.
I know. But it's amazing to see what they morphed into with this Trans-Siberian Orchestra. It's crazy.
Yeah. When we're talking about changing vocalists, because they did, and that's another thing. Without John, it's hard to fucking listen
It's
to
hard.
Sabotage,
It's
because
hard, man.
he was to me the voice of Sabotage.
I agree completely.
So why don't you give a pick now?
Oh, let's go to this here. This was on your list. Uh, Lizzie Borden giving the axe
Oh
EP.
yes, yes,
Great EP. I mean, amazing.
yeah. They were like, they weren't extreme. They were just good metal, heavy metal,
Yep.
and they were still considered underground. Now that was a band that later got bigger and they got recognition. You'd see them on MTV sometimes and
Yep.
stuff like that.
Yep.
Um, People still talk about them. They're not as big as some of those bands got, but people talk about Lizzie Borden. They definitely usually remember the band.
Yeah, and he's a great singer too. I love his vocal style and approach. I eat that shit up.
Yeah, it's interesting because I heard in an interview that he originally used the name Lizzie Borden just because of the concept of the first album. And he was going to change it every album,
Oh,
but
really?
it just caught on and he just kept using it. But
Yeah.
um, a friend of mine saw him in Maine, and he said he played in the wintertime at this small club. So my buddy traveled to go see him, and he said there was literally like maybe 10 people. And he said the coolest thing was he played like he was playing in front of like 5,000 and gave the whole stage
That's
show
great.
and gave the whole, and that's really cool to hear after, so much time of playing metal.
Totally agree.
Okay, let's see. Okay. How about Onslaught Power from Hell from 1985? That was a band that I discovered again at a record store. I was visiting my buddy, and he lived in the Hicks in Michigan, and they just happened to have one record store. And I remember seeing that album and picking it up and was like, "Wow, this is fucking kick ass, man! It's just
Totally underrated.
yeah, for sure." And they went on to do one another album. One of my favorites is The Force, and The
Yes.
Force is fucking amazing. Um, I definitely like The Force better than the debut album, but again, the band that later came back put out some really cool fucking solid albums, and for all I know, I think they're still playing this day, aren't they?
I think so too.
Yeah.
Funny, we mentioned Anthrax before and Neil Turbin, but I got to see Onslaught one time in the city somewhere, and Cy
Mhm.
Keeler was off the tour for some reason. They had Neil Turbin fill in for him, so I got to see Neil Turbin sing for Onslaught, which I thought was pretty cool.
Is that yeah, I saw the same tour. I think Artillery was on that one.
Maybe I
Um,
forget who else was on it, but
but yeah, well, I remember that I guess he had to fill in at the last minute. He was having a lot of problems at the Columbus show. He was forgetting the lyrics and stuff, but I guess he only had like a week to learn the set or
right,
something.
right, right. He did okay for the show that we saw, but I just thought it was cool to see him,
Right, in
with his
person.
history singing for Onslaught.
Yeah, for sure. And they were they even had that the singer for Grim Reaper for an album or
Yeah.
two.
In Search of Sanity.
Yeah, yeah. Wasn't my favorite, but it wasn't bad either.
Yeah.
That again, they went from the darker stuff to kind of have fun thrash type stuff, which
Yeah.
was kind of weird. But again, going back and listening to it again, you can still appreciate what they did.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I got a couple more. I got USA for M.O.D. I just
Oh
thought it
yeah.
was, following the script of like Carnivore and S.O.D, for Billy Milano to go and form this when they broke up.
Mm-hmm.
This was a controversial record too. It had a lot of controversial songs on it. AIDS, Aren't You Hungry? Everybody knows the lyrics of those songs, and I don't think
Spandex
you could.
enormity.
Yeah, bubble butt. Like I don't
Right.
think you could put out a record like this today, like you said, with the
Oh
shit that's going on.
no, not for it. Yeah, that is definitely again, if it would be released today, canceled automatically.
Yeah,
But it's a fun album. I mean, I think a lot
really
of
is.
people had a good time like listening to that stuff.
This was kind of like my first crossover record as a kid when I was delving into thrash bands. Like I saw this cassette at the store and I was like, I brought it home and I fell in love with it instantly. So this was like the first crossover thrash record I ever heard. So it holds a special place for me.
Right. It's not really metal, but it still deserves a mention because it was big in that era. Remember the old mentors?
Yes, yes.
I mean, that's another that fucking you asked for it. Anything or up the dose. You could never release that shit now.
No
I
way.
mean, that was like a couple steps away from GG Allen shit. It was just
Very crude lyrically, for sure.
so in their face, and El Duce like lived the lifestyle. He was definitely not playing it. The guitarist Ben Meyer from Nasty Savage, he played Nashron for a couple years, and when we were playing together, El Duce was his roommate.
Was he really?
And I remember the first time I went over there, we were rehearsing and go take a fucking piss, and there's a book in the bathroom, and it was like all these vaginal tumor disease like things, and it was like fucking the most hideous fucking photos you could ever fucking imagine.
I bet.
And so I go back in the practice room, and I was like, what the fuck do you have that in your bathroom for? And the response was the most classy. He goes, well, Duce just likes to knock them out the fucking certain things. I'm like, oh man, it's fucking crazy, man.
Did you ever get to see them live?
I did not see them live.
I never did, but
And I guess they've done shows without El Duce, but you can't replace El Duce. No. That's just he was the man.
Their shows must have been pretty wild, I bet.
Right. Let's see. What have we missed? I'm sure we missed a lot, but
I know you brought up MANOWAR.
Oh, fuck yeah, man.
Battle Hymns.
MANOWAR. Yep.
1982.
Again, that was more just metal taken to a little bit more of a level, higher level.
Yep.
God, they released so many kick-ass fucking albums and big tunes that you fucking either hate MANOWAR or you just fucking absolutely fucking adore them. And
that's kind of how it is, right? It's either kind of love them or hate them band. My favorite's always been Fighting the World. I know it's kind of more of a commercial record than what they had done, but I just think the songs are good on that, man. Like I saw MANOWAR one time down in a club in New Jersey, and they played the whole Battle Hymns record front to back, and the place was packed, like you couldn't even move. But legendary band, legendary songs. I mean, I think they're much bigger in Europe than they are here in the States, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they headline a lot of festivals and stuff over there, and they're definitely making the money. So, but more power to them because they definitely haven't changed or sold out. They've been doing the same shit for years. And
totally agree.
But I think my favorite song from them is Hatred from In Glory Ride.
Okay.
God damn, that's fucking just has almost like an Ian Gillan kind of feel to it with those screams he does is
Right,
fucking
right.
sick as fuck.
Yeah, some really good stuff there. Black Wind, Fire, and Steel.
Right. So do you have any not on the list?
I think we pretty much covered everything that we talked about and everything that I came up with as from what I'm looking at. We did Creator, we did S.O.D, we did Venom, Celtic Frost, Bathory, Hellhammer, Possessed.
Again, I'm sure we're gonna get 50 million people fucking saying you fuckers missed this, you missed that. These the whole idea about this was basically just to show that, you know, these bands at one time were hard to find bands. They were bands that were struggling at the time and definitely weren't making a living at it. They had to kind of push forward to get to the level they're at today.
Yep.
And you got to give them fucking hails for that, and a big part of starting this whole fucking underground metal scene.
And like you said, they're all legendary and they're all kind of different. Like everybody has their own kind of thing going on. I think that's probably the coolest part about what we talked about here with these bands, you know?
Absolutely. Okay, brother. I appreciate you joining me today, and hopefully some fucking people that might not have got into this stuff yet or young can go back and listen to these fucking classic bands.
Hell yeah.
But best of luck on the channel like always, and keep bringing us metal, man.
Hey man, thank you for having me on. You know, you're one of our biggest supporters here with our channel, and you know, coming from you, I mean, that's, you know, how much better does it get than that? So I really appreciate it, and you know, I'm a huge fan and always was, and I'm probably a bigger fan now than I ever was of you and what you're doing. So thank you very much.
Oh, I appreciate it, brother.
All right.
Okay. Until next time, we will see you on the dark side.
Take it easy, everybody.